Great to see you. Perfect.
Awesome. Awesome.
Great.
Hi.
How are you? Look at it. You are still so fresh.
This is the first time I'm talking to someone on live and someone who's like a fellow Tamilian. So it's cool.
Okay. Great. Nalla irken in your own accent. Super. Great. First of all, thank you for joining in. Thank you for all of you viewing the live. It's quite late, we know, but we thought we'll try and do this at this part of the hour so that we can take it slightly slow and these kind of conversations could be a lot more interesting when done slower. So, super. Thank you for joining us. I'm really excited to talk about all your travel but then before jumping in there, I really want to understand, like, Tamilian and settled in Bombay and lived across cities, right? Like, how did travel happen? Like, how did travel start?
So I think I've been genetically blessed with travel because my father used to work in the airline industry. He used to work with Cathay Pacific Airways, which is a Hong Kong-based airline. So he spent like 25 years of his career as a sales and marketing, person at Cathay. And his life actually had a lot of travel as I was growing up. And we used to get these things called staff
Free
tickets.
tickets. Yeah.
Wait, no. All my friends used to think, wow, free ticket, but it's the bottom of the
That's
travel.
okay. That's
Because
okay.
once we were flying from just Chennai to Bombay, we got on the plane and then we were demoted because paying
Yeah.
customers. This is what the
Correct.
tough is. I have to complain. But yeah, yeah.
I'm like, come on. Super. But I think, so even some of my own family members who work at Air India, I think the family
Yeah.
ticket concept really nailed it.
Yeah. Air India gives not just daughter, son, and wife, daughter-in-law, grandson, grandfather, the whole family gets free tickets. So I don't know how they manage it. But yeah, Cathay used to
Yeah.
give us free tickets until the kid turned 20 or something. Yeah, 21. Yeah. So
Super. So it's just a lot of travel.
but back then it's not like my dad was making like great money. We would grow up as a middle class family, so we used to travel locally a little bit, like Kodaikanal and like Ooty and like a lot of temple trips. Because you know how Tamil families are while growing up. If you go to a temple, means it's a trip. And I was like, Dad, this is not a trip. But it was a lot of like local stuff. And I remember the first time we went abroad was when I was 11. We went to the US to meet some of our family members. But
And that's very middle class, right?
that was when we started making some money, and my dad was like, okay, I want my kids to
Super.
see the world that I've seen the world. And so he was always very, very like, I want my family to travel. Like his life also revolved around travel. So I think when I was in my teens is when we started doing more like trips more often. Yeah. Yeah.
So I think just as all of us, like for example, banks and all of that, right? So you get so used to going to banks. Given your dad must have been a pilot, I think airports must have been like truly pulling you in most of the time. No wonder.
Yeah. I've
So
seen a lot of airports. Yeah, that's
so
right.
what was that US trip a very defining moment for you, or what really
Not
kind of
at
hit
all.
you?
Not at all. The US trip was more about family, meeting my cousins, and obviously I was like, oh wow, like this was the summer before the World Trade Center came down, like
Okay.
2001. So I just remember, oh wow, such big buildings. This is such a different world. But I think until 2015, travel never like gave me the kind of like joy that it gives
Kick.
me now.
Yeah.
So it was very delayed. It was very late. Travel earlier used to just be a people thing, like, oh, I'm traveling with my family. I never used to travel alone. I started traveling with my friends only when I moved to Mumbai and we went to Goa. And again, it was more about like the partying and more about that. It was less about the place, the culture. I think those little things started happening for me only when I hit 2015. Yeah, yeah.
So what
So
is that one trip that really kind of changed your perspective and got you hooked on to travel then?
that was Iceland in 2015. And this, I
Okay.
think, was our third international trip as a family in life. We did US, and then my mom, dad, and I did Istanbul once because my dad
Wow.
got some,
Okay.
he had won some internal agency award or something. So we got free tickets, we went. And Iceland was for his 60th birthday. And everyone was like, why Iceland? Iceland was not on the radar really at that point. Even in 2015, it was still like,
Yeah.
land with ice. That's what I thought. That's what everyone around me thought. But my dad had gone there for to close some deal, and he loved the place, and he said, "This is where I want to go." And we went, and that was the first time I went to a place which I had not really researched. I had not known anything about it. Like I said, I went with the preconceived notion that it's going to be cold and there's just going to be ice. But oh my God, like breathtaking. That was the first time I felt what nature, the power of nature can do to you, what new people can do to you. I started appreciating the local culture more, their whole Viking history, like they're from the Scandinavian countries, right? So their history is very different, the way they talk, the way they are. And I think that was the first time I started noticing a change in me. Like I was more curious about more about, the culture, the history, and less about just what I was seeing. And I think I came back from that trip feeling like blown, like completely mind blown.
So what is that change? And because a lot of people talk about how traveling is for some people it's such a passion and it really hooks you on, right? So given that if you're talking about that particular trip, what did you see was like one big change in you as a person that really got you say, okay, I'm going to do this more often. I'm going to do this with more conviction and more discipline and lot more fun. Like what really was that trigger?
I think one big thing I noticed about myself on that trip, and in the 2 months after that, I put in some savings from my desk job and I went to Egypt as well. And I think on those trips, I noticed that I was more, I used to be that person like any other Bombay person, complaining about the traffic, complaining about her job, complaining about just everything. Oh, it's so hot. I used to always place so much significance on my exterior, like, anything that was
Absolutely.
outside
Yeah.
my control. And on these trips also, a lot of things went wrong. Like especially Egypt, I went alone with my cousin. That was the first time I was doing something where I was completely in charge of the planning. And so many things went wrong, from the food to like, we missed some experiences and all of that. But I was happy. I noticed that when I was traveling, I was a very different person. I was way more chilled out. I was way more open to experiences. I was way more okay with everything not going my way. And I was like, I like this girl. Like, I like this person. I like that she loves the challenges and she's not complaining about them. She's actually breathing, living life a lot more when she's traveling. And I think I noticed that after I went to Egypt and I was like, hey, this is a nicer person. Like, this is a more chilled out person. Like, why am I living this life where every day if I'm waking up and complaining, it's not that I hated my job, it's not that I hated my city, but it just happens. Sometimes life just keeps going on and you notice that you're just cribbing. So I think I was just like, this is something that I need to give its due attention to because I'm a very different person. I'm a happy person when I'm traveling. And I think that was one of the softer things that I noticed on these two trips.
So I think it's a very interesting point because, like you said, even when we started, I realized that a lot of the things that we hold true back home really don't matter to you when you're traveling, right? So, and then that kind of the sense of liberation and that freedom, like you said, really puts a very different perspective on how you experience and what you soak into yourself. I think I completely feel you when you say that you're a very different person when you're traveling, right? And by default, I mean, things can go wrong in travel when you're traveling, right? So it's never going to be as perfect as your normal life. Super. So what I'm really kicked about is I've also kind of read about your overall Central Asia trip. I think that's been a dream for quite a while for me, and to have done that at such pace, for me, the Trans-Siberian is like forever the most amazing thing I want to do. But you did over 2 months Central Asia. Like, what really sparked the idea? Can you talk us through like how it was?
Yeah, so this was the first big trip that I did after I quit my full-time job. It was almost 8, 9 months after I quit my full-time job. I had done a few local trips by then, and I was building this whole audience, this whole brand of Truly Nomadly and all of that. And I wanted to save up and go somewhere very far away, somewhere where I didn't know much about that place. It was like a challenge I set up for myself. A lot of us, we are like, we're backpackers, and I also used to say that, but then I was like, wait, Sharu, the maximum you've done is some 3 weeks solo in the northeast of India. You need to do more to be able to tell yourself that you want to do this long term. I was just like, I need to know if I'm happy about doing this full time and at a continued stretch. So that's when I was like, I want to go somewhere. And Africa was a long standing dream. East Africa, I want to do, like, it's still a big dream, but it turned out to be very expensive. And then there was this event called the World Nomad Games in Kyrgyzstan, which happens once every 2 years. And in 2018, it was happening again in Kyrgyzstan in September. And I'd seen some blogger had gone 2 years ago in 2016. I was like, that sounds great. And then I started researching a bit. Tickets were quite cheap from Delhi. I lost some hair getting my visas done. But I was like, okay, if I'm going to Kyrgyzstan, I need to do more in the region. I'm going for 2 months. So then I added Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan into the mix. And that's what sparked the trip, the World Nomad Games. It's the Central Asian Olympics. It's like a celebration of their nomadic culture. It's like a whole party up in the mountains. Everyone's like doing horseback archery, long distance horse races, eagle hunting, dog racing, like stuff you've not ever seen live, let alone like seen it on TV. Like it seemed like I was on the set of Game of Thrones or something. Like it was so different. And that trip, I think, really convinced me. I didn't need to convince anyone else. I just need to convince myself that this is what I want to do. And I think that did it fabulously well for me. I was sold. Like even today, like I'll randomly do throwbacks from that trip 2 years ago. It's one of those trips I miss. It's so close to my heart. It's so special. And I did it on a bare budget because I am a budget traveler. Like when I'm traveling by myself, now I'm financially independent. I spend my own money. I don't think we've done a family trip like this in a very long time. Now I'm traveling for myself. So it's always about staying in the cheapest possible hostel, taking food from the supermarket and making something simple, cutting corners all the time. And I was really proud of the fact that I came back in one piece and I spent as much as maybe just a little more than I'd intended to spend. So yeah, I think it was kind of like a coming of age trip for me.
So 2 months is quite a while, right? So how do you generally plan for this trip? How did you mentally get prepared? And what really kind of, I mean, 2 months is a lot of time. I mean, you're locked down for 2 months almost now, and it's not fun, right? So,
Yeah.
so obviously you're out in Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, but how do you pace it out? How do you kind of keep it exciting for you the week after week? Could you talk us through that?
I think this question is just the answer is just that I love to be traveling in new places so much. Like I cannot compare lockdown to that at all. One, I was seeing three different countries, and even though they're neighboring countries, they're so different from each other in many ways. And to me, that was amazing that I had to wake up every day and the thing is, I don't plan too much. I'm not even someone who goes in completely blind. I have basics done. Like I'll book my first 2 nights of hostel. Say my first stop was in Kazakhstan. I booked those first 2 nights. I figured how I need to get from the airport to this place, which taxi app I need to download, what are the few things to be seen in that city, and then I just go with the flow. Because when you stay in a hostel, you're bound to meet more people,
Meet new
especially
people.
like Kazakhstan and all of that, you find more seasoned travelers. You're not going to find like a couple who's just come to chill by themselves. You're not going to find people who are not interactive. More often than not in places like this, there are seasoned backpackers who come and then you get together. You maybe rent a car, you rent
Discover. Yeah.
something, then you go together. So, you know, in a sense, from that second I landed and met my hostel friends, I have met them in Kazakhstan, and someone else was on a different timeline. They left. 2 weeks later, I'm running into them in another city in Uzbekistan. The same people, because typically that's how it's done in Central Asia. People tend to kind of like cover at least one or two countries together, especially Europeans and all of them on a gap year. Like they have time, so they really like give. So I think those 2 months were all about seeing as much as I could, but also chilling. Because I was also working. I had become a freelancer by then. I had my content writing
Okay.
project. It was not just all la la, let's go party and come back. It was also like in the day I have to get some work done, keep that money going and stuff like that. And there were days when I did nothing. I felt terribly sick in the very first week, and I was like, oh my god, this is horrible. But then again, strangers turn out to be some of the most beautiful people you meet. I was taken care of by my homestay owner like I was her own daughter. We barely spoke two words that we understood. But then, you know, turns out love and care is the same language everywhere in the world. So, yeah, man, like those 2 months, they fell short. I was very sad about leaving, but I had a visa only for a month in Kyrgyzstan, so I had to come back or I would have extended it for sure. Yeah.
Super. So talking about hostels, right? Given you've kind of done a lot of backpacking and budget, I think the audience would love to know, like, how do you build safety? How do you choose hostels that are safe? And some of the hacks that you yourself do to kind of choose the right hostel.
When it comes to choosing hostels, I usually use booking.com or Hostel World, and they pretty much function like any of your apps, Zomato or Airbnb. There are reviews, there are ratings, and my biggest tip to anyone is to not just see the first two reviews or the first three reviews. I go back to like page two, page three, and I definitely don't pick a hostel that has only like three, four reviews because then it's new and I don't know if I can trust it. And I've had it go wrong. In my early days when I was in Bali, well, when I was traveling with a full-time job, I went to a hostel which had bed bugs and shit. So I'm very careful. And now it's almost by default. I'll just check the reviews, I'll scan through them, I'll see the ratings, and that's it. I'll book it for the first 2 nights. Safety, personal safety, I always have pepper spray with me. It's just one of those things that's very handy. It's a small bottle. It's in my like sling bag that's with me, easily accessible. And I try and tell at least one person, not my parents, but like my brother or some friend about where I'm staying for a period of time. So if 1 week I'm in X hostel, they'll know and that's the address and that's the phone number. I don't have to tell them every day I'm going here, I'm coming back. But I just try and tell someone basically where I am because what if I'm out on a trek and I never make it back and no one even knows where is this girl in which town. So I think I owe it to someone in the family to just tell them where I am. And I definitely do that. I'm not one of those people who's like, forget it, I'm all independent, I don't care. I think it's important to just put your family at peace, especially Indian parents. Yeah, you know how crazy it can get with them. So they imagine the worst always. It's like Sharanya is going somewhere, she's lying in a ditch, she's dead, and I don't know. Yeah. So I just try to kind of appease them by telling them where I am. These are my two biggest hacks. Find the best hostel possible. Find it close to city center or the center of the town. Don't find some place just because it's super cheap and it's like in the outskirts. It's very difficult to make it back, especially if you want to be out late in the evening and stuff. You don't want to spend on cabs. You just want to walk it back. So I think I put a location filter, I put a review and rating filter, and that's about it.
Super. Yeah. And so what's been your most, how do I put it, scary slash, like nerve-wracking hostel experience till now? Apart from Bali.
Apart from Bali, I've not really had. I mean, just recently I was in. This is an India story. It's so sad. I usually love hostels in India also, but I was in Shimla before I was going off to Spiti Valley in February. That was my last trip. And nothing, yeah, it was just the only hostel that was available and I booked it and it was a room full of boys from like, I think they said they were from Noida, like Haryana. And they were super noisy, way into the night, into 1 a.m. And they were like drinking and using really, really shitty language. And, I was just like, I want to sleep, I want to wake up at 5. But, these are things you have to be okay with if you're booking a hostel. Sometimes people are not well behaved. They don't follow general etiquette. Because most hostels, you included, you will know after 10, kind of keep it down, go somewhere outside if you want to talk, go to the garden.
The common area. Yeah.
Correct. But it's okay. It's like, it doesn't ruin my mood because I'm used to it. It's okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Super. So coming back to Central Asia trip, so between Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Kyrgyzstan, if you have to pick one, I know it's difficult, but if you have to pick one, why?
It's actually very easy for me. Over time, I know which place was my like soul place. That was Kyrgyzstan. So I spent 2 weeks in Kazakhstan, 2 weeks in Uzbekistan, and then a whole month in Kyrgyzstan. It's the smallest of those three countries, which is why I was like, if I spend more time there, I will be able to do more justice to it. And then the World Nomad Games, like I told you, was just something like I'd never seen before. And it was also very charming because how our school annual days are like, right? Nothing is on time. Nobody knows what's happening. Even despite all the planning, there is chaos. Some teachers yelling at some students. That was the World Nomad Games. Like there was one event where the Altai Republic team didn't show up and then Kyrgyzstan just won by default and then they played within each other to entertain the crowd and everyone's like, what is going on? One team doesn't know where the event is happening, one team doesn't know what time it's happening, the commentator saying some rubbish, like. And once, like, there was this horseback archery event, it was the semi-finals and it was held in this massive valley surrounded by mountains. It was not snow time yet, so it was still pleasant, like autumn weather. And camels are going by, horses, there's like eagles flying. It was very bizarre. And the audience brief was just sit as far away as possible from the main field because some of the participants weren't skilled. They had just come. Okay. So there was no there was no strict like participation meter. That, like, you know how Olympics has playoffs and you know stuff like that. Here they're just like, this is still fairly new. We want more people to come. So whoever can come, I could have done it. Like they would have accepted me also. So they're like, sit as far as you can, because you don't know, some arrow might come and hit you. Like stuff like that, you know. So it was really crazy. The World Nomad Games was a whole week, and then I hiked. Kyrgyzstan is really famous for its high altitude alpine lakes. You do horseback treks. Their horses and their eagles are kind of like their spirit animals because they're nomadic people. So I really learned how to love a horse, how to speak to a horse, how to kind of form that bond with a horse. Like day one of horse riding is the worst. Your bum is killing you. You're like just like, can I please be done? But after that, when you get used to it, when your body gets used to it, you form like this. It's hard to explain, but you do form a
It's
bond.
a real feeling. Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of like family for them. And then I don't know if you've seen pictures of their homes high up in the mountains. They're called yurts. In Mongolia, they call gers.
Yeah.
In Kyrgyzstan, they call yurts. So it's this cute little rounded, but it's not a tent. It's much bigger than a tent, and it's built with bamboo and felt because it needs to keep out the
Warm.
cold.
Yes,
Yeah,
it's warm,
and
right.
it's all community. Like if we had a guide with us, he would be sleeping in the same room as us on our sleeping bag. If we're eating all together. There's no like separate tourist, separate guide, separate driver. It's just everyone's the same person over there, because that's what I loved about Central Asia as a whole. Like their people are so warm, and they don't see you. You know, sometimes you go to some place and they're like, oh, this is a tourist. We have to give them respect. We have to like put them on a pedestal. They'll be very like, you know, oh my God, I have to give her the best time. But here they're very relaxed. They're like, you've come here, come
Chill.
sit with me.
Yeah.
Let's chat, let's chill. I love that. I don't like it when someone's, you know, sometimes I suppose this is how a big celebrity would feel sometimes. You know, they just sometimes want to feel normal. They don't want someone in front of them to be on their toes and tips, you know. So I think that was beautiful, to just dine and sleep with the locals and chat with them on Google Translate and stuff like that.
So I was gonna get there, right? Because I was gonna get that, sorry to break in, but language must have been like super difficult there. And food. Are you a vegetarian?
I am. So I grew up vegetarian, and then I ate chicken a little bit in the middle, and then I gave it up 3 months before this trip. So I was completely vegetarian on the trip. Yeah, it
So
was.
must have been like super crazy, right? Both from a language perspective and a food perspective. Like how did you manage that?
Yeah. So the thing is, all of these countries, all of these stans were actually ruled by the USSR, and they all got their independence in 1991. So they're very young nations, and Russian is still spoken across all of these countries. And then they have their local language, which is Uzbek or
Don't tell
Kazakh.
me you know Russian.
No, I just picked up a few words. Like, thank you, it's spasiba. And you know, I learned
Oh
things like,
bože is I think, oh my God.
yeah, and Russian is very tough. Like I still don't know how to say Zdravstvuyte. I don't know how to say it. But yeah, I learned it back then. And I again knew in the local language, say in Kyrgyz, thank you was Rahmat and stuff like that. But everything else was like Google Translate and like sign language and like, you know, so I learned how to say no meat. I learned how to say I don't eat chicken, I don't eat all of that.
No fish.
I would kind of have to be okay with the fact sometimes to just take off the meat and eat the veggies and like I'm not that particular. I'm not one of those people who's like, oh my God, I can't touch. I can't be that person, yeah, when I'm traveling. Like it would be impossible.
So much, yeah.
It's impossible on such a long trip to carry your MTR ready to eat and stuff. It's not possible. It's not going to last that long. So food was a hassle, but there was a whole lot of bread. There was a whole lot of soup. There was a whole lot of like veggie noodles and then vegetables and rice. And sometimes I would just pick up stuff from the supermarket and put it together in the hostel kitchen. And pulled it through.
So when I was in Russia, I think there was this mashed potato dish, right? So I think I really survived.
Yes.
Yeah, I think potato and rice is a slightly good combination there.
Yeah.
And then I carry salsa sauce wherever I go because I think that's the best thing that you could do. Just pour it on top and I mash it up.
Yeah, I think the biggest difficulty for someone like me was, where is the spice? Like, oh my God,
yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, so every time. Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
For it.
No, I was just saying that's why I think the kimchi really helps because I think kimchi is really, it lasts really long and then it really gives you that spice plus fiber because sometimes, when you're traveling a lot, you end up missing out on fiber a lot. This makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think like whenever I was in the capital city of each country, there would inevitably be an Indian restaurant that I would find. I would go, I would eat my dal chawal. And I have no like, I know some travelers are like, hey, what man, you're going there and you're eating Indian food. Like, to each
No way.
their own.
I think it's yeah.
Eat it. Don't do what the world wants you to do. Just do what will make you happy. So I would always map out where the Indian restaurants were. And the thing is, that's the beauty of being an Indian. We are everywhere. We are all over the world. Our movies are all over the world. And this is interesting. Central Asia loves Bollywood. Loves, like back when they were ruled by the USSR.
Akshay Kumar, I'm sure.
No.
Akshay Kumar shot quite a bit there, I think.
Yeah, but I'll tell you who they love. They're still stuck in the 70s and 80s of Bollywood. They used to, back when they were ruled by the USSR, they used to smuggle our movies and watch. Raj Kapoor and Mithun Chakraborty are superstars even now. Like, they will not say Shah Rukh Khan. And, you know, if you go to Indonesia and stuff like that, Egypt also, they'll say Shah Rukh Khan, Amitabh Bachchan. But here, they would still sing like Jimmy Jimmy and like Ichik Dana, like Raj Kapoor and Mithun. And my name, when it's short, like I used to introduce myself as Sharu, because Sharanya they won't get.
Yeah.
And they used to then think, oh, Shah Rukh Khan, are you related to Shah Rukh Khan? So, you know, like, you know how when white people come to India, everyone's like trying to get selfies with them? Indians, especially Indian girls in Central Asia, huge celebrities. Like, oh my God, I want a selfie with you. Oh my God, I want you to come home and have free chai with me and stuff like that. So in Bollywood is immensely huge in all of these three countries. It got me going
and
a lot.
How's nightlife then in Central Asia? Like, is it happening? I've heard very mixed stories there.
So it's happening in the bigger cities, of course. Like there are pubs, and a lot of their bigger cities are quite westernized. There are pubs, there's alcohol, there's pizza, there's Italian, there's Starbucks, all of that. So in fact, I remember when I hit the capital city of Kyrgyzstan, which is Bishkek, I ran into some people in my hostel, and that very night they were going on to party. So I was like, okay, I want to see what does partying mean in Bishkek, because I had not explored the city. I went, it was a proper like big swanky pub. People are dressed like how we dress when we go to pubs. It was very, I think I was looking for something different, but it actually felt very normal. It could have been a nightclub in Delhi, it could have been a nightclub in Bombay, except obviously the people were quite cosmopolitan and Western. But yeah, I partied, man. I partied in Bishkek and I partied in, yeah, there were a lot of belly dance. So, fun fact, when I was in a hostel in Almaty in Kazakhstan, my friends were there was one guy from Australia, there were two guys from Holland, and there was one guy from Germany. And they were like, they wanted Indian food that night. They were like, they'd been traveling, they were sick. So we went to an Indian restaurant and we saw these belly dancers walking around. And then we saw this separate chamber and there were a bunch of Indian men sitting down. So apparently, Kyrgyzstan and Kazakhstan kind of have this thing of being like a sex tourism place. So, you know, men come there to like have their fun, kind of like how Pattaya and Bangkok have the reputation.
I think Central Asia is slowly becoming the Thailand of yeah.
Yeah, that's really bad. Yeah.
I think that you can't avoid. I think yeah.
You can't change it. So yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we were quite like, oh my God, these men with their wives back home, look what they're doing here, and they were very like amazed by what was happening. Yeah.
Super. So coming back, so I think the Central Asia trip, I think it's truly nomadly in some sense. It kind of gave you that. But like, what are other things that you really enjoy while traveling? So one is mountains, Spiti Valley, hiking, and the nomad games. What other parts of travel? Like, are you a beach person? What really gets you excited? Or are you a mountain person? Like have you done those scenic train rides in Central Europe?
I'm a total ocean person. You know, sometimes people ask you mountains or ocean and people are confused, or a lot of them will say actually mountains. But sorry, guys, I'm not reading your question.
No, there's one question that came up right now. There's been a lot of love coming your way, but super. I think we'll just pick up the first question now that we've been here broken. So where are the best places to travel alone within budget, by the way, obviously? Some places to travel alone.
I'd say within India, like if you want to start traveling solo on the whole, think local first. Think about a place that you can go to and you can come back from in case you don't like it. So that's how I started. It was Diwali weekend. In my family, we're not really big on Diwali. So I was like, I want to go somewhere. This is the only time I get time off from work and I want to escape the noise and the pollution and all of that. I just got onto a bus to Hampi. I was like, chal, it's 12 hours away.
Beautiful, beautiful
If
place.
and I was like, if I hate it, all I have to do is jump into that bus and come back to Bombay. And I think that was a key factor for me. And that's what I tell a lot of people. If you're traveling solo for the first time, start small. Don't plan a 1 week long trip far, far away. Because what if you're really lonely and you don't like it? So I think tips within India would be do Hampi, even do Goa if you want to go alone. You're bound to meet people in
Gokarna.
hostels. Gokarna,
Yeah.
all of these places have a big hostel culture. Rajasthan, even Ladakh in a way does, but it's a little far. And Ladakh is a place
If
where
they
you
get
could
acclimatized, yeah,
correct,
they don't want to do that.
correct. So I'd say start small, find a city or a town that has hostels, and definitely try and do that. Don't go to a hotel and go all alone because then you're going to feel lonely. And solo travel, I think a lot of people have this misconception that solo travel is you're all alone. You're barely alone when you're traveling solo if you do it the way most of us do it. You don't have to be lonely. Go meet people, talk to them. They'll come up to you. If you feel you're an introvert, there are many times when I feel like I can't approach someone. There's a block sometimes. But people come up to you, they'll instantly ask you where you're from. Everyone's so inclusive
Those
in a hostel.
conversations automatically start happening.
Absolutely. Yeah. And immediately it's like, oh, where are you going tomorrow? Can I come along? Stuff like that. So just be open to people. And I think the biggest thing solo travel has taught me is to be able to trust people. And it's built my gut, like my instinct,
Yeah.
very, very well. Like now I know if my instinct is telling me to do something, I can do it. And if it tells me to do something, I will definitely not do it. So
Especially if given you've lived quite a bit in hostels, right? You kind of get a wave of people, the way they behave, and you get a sense of, do you want to get out of this person late in the night, or you want to tag along
yeah,
for a tomorrow morning trip, right? I think it really helps you build that. Totally true.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
So one small tip, I think, for personally for me, what worked out in Hampi was staying on the other side of the river. It was a
Yes.
fluke that we did, but
Yeah.
I think it worked out beautiful. Just staying, like just viewing those paddy fields and just super super awesome.
Yeah.
Coming back, some more questions. How many Indian tourists did you meet in the whole of 2 months in Central Asia?
Twice I met a small group of Indians, once in Uzbekistan. They were actually, this is so cool. They were snow leopard. They were people who worked in an organization that researched snow leopards. Kyrgyzstan is known for its snow leopards. So they were at a conference there. And then they came to Uzbekistan to travel and they met me. And we got along like a house on fire. We're very, very special. We're still friends. I meet them when I go to Bangalore. And I met people in this pub in Kyrgyzstan and Bishkek. That's it. Otherwise, I mean, I saw, a lot of hostels abroad have this culture where they'll ask people to collect, to leave
Yeah,
behind a currency
yes,
note. So
something.
obviously,
Yeah,
I saw India, like I saw a stamp. So I saw signs of Indians having been there, obviously, but I didn't really run into too many Indians. But I think in 2 years, a lot has changed. Central Asia has kind of become a lot
totally.
more acceptable now with e-visas to all of these countries. So
And also,
you
I
will
think
run into Indians.
a large part of it also because Delhi has very good connectivity now to Central Asia, which has increased
Yeah,
number of flights and stuff.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Super. I think this is covered, but maybe you could just quickly talk about it. How do you select hostels? If the question's back again, but if you want to go take a shot again, you could.
Okay, I'll quickly tell you, we kind of ran through this. Definitely use a more known portal. Like I use booking.com or Hostel World. And what I do is I have two filters. One is location. I try to ensure that I'm finding a place that's closer to the center or to the more like populated part of that town or city because you don't want to be restricted by that. If you're out in the night, you want to be able to either walk back or get into a quick bus or taxi. Second, I look at ratings and reviews and make sure that you're going into page 2, page 3 of the reviews.
Read
So
multiple reviews.
you really get a sense of what a lot of people are saying. Don't just read the first 3, 4 reviews because sometimes, that's not indicative of the overall experience people have had in that place. So I think these two things are very important. Price, obviously, but don't choose price over location for sure. Because I've done that in the past in Bali and I was like, those are my worst experience. So yeah.
Super.
Yeah.
Are there any Bedouin camps in Kyrgyzstan?
No, Bedouins come
No?
from the Middle East. So you will find Bedouin camps in Jordan, in
I think
Oman, in Dubai. But the nomads in Kyrgyzstan are not Bedouins. The Bedouins are from the Middle East. But there are camps, there are yurt camps, like I said, up in the valleys. They live in these beautiful homes that they build themselves that are portable. So when it's winter, winter in Central Asia is really harsh. So they can't stay there then. So they actually pack up their yurts,
Come
they
down.
go and then they come back. So it's kind of, that's why they call nomads. They don't live in one spot for the whole of their lives.
So I think, I mean, while it may be very anecdotal, but I really feel that you read a lot also before traveling because. So is that something you picked up because you travel? Because I think one personal thing I like to do more when I travel is read up a lot about the place, which I don't think I do enough as yet. But how does that change perspective? Have you done trips or even read much about the place? Which is having read enough about a place, how does it change for you?
Like I said, so I like to, this is a newer habit that I've picked up, which is not just reading blogs, which I do always. I try to read blogs, not even Lonely Planet. I'm not actually one of those people who has a Lonely Planet. I know a lot of people do. But to me, I actually read blogs of solo female travelers. Largely, I try and find, because I want a woman's perspective on the place, generally what to look out for. Like, for instance, Central Asia, a blog that I read told me how to ward off like advances from men over there, she had to wear like an engagement ring and just lie that she had, still engaged or married or whatever. I didn't end up doing that, but I would still say if someone was a little too,
That's a good
because
tip. Yeah.
love Indian so much, right? Especially Indian girls. So sometimes even if it was innocent, it would be a lot of like, oh my God, you're gorgeous, you're the most beautiful thing I've seen on the planet, and it's uncomfortable. So I used to just be like, oh, I'm talking to my boyfriend. You can lie. You can be anyone when you're traveling solo. I wasn't even myself. Like I used to make up shit. I used to say I'm traveling with my friends. They've just gone to another town. So you adapt, right? What was the question? I fully lost my train of thought.
So the question was about reading about a place, history,
Yeah.
and how much that does help you appreciate the place a lot more.
I feel like it gives me a certain sense of like the geography of the place. You know how, like, say India, now we know what is where and north and south. I think I do that reading just to get a sense of like um, the geography and the lay of the land. Because I feel like that helps me feel like I can acquaint myself better and faster. Because when I go somewhere, I anyway take the first full week to get really into the groove of things. I'm not that person who goes and then on day two is out and about. I, in fact, chill. I talk to the people at my hostel, like the locals. I try to understand where they would go. Because I think the local perspective is the most important thing, which you will not get in a lot of blogs from a lot of places. Because you usually get the tourist perspective, like the traveler perspective. So I do a fair amount of reading just to understand top places to see. And then I also kind of use keywords like offbeat places to see in Kyrgyzstan because I want the perspective of people like me who like to go beyond the usual stuff. And what I've also started doing is I want to even read books from that place because that kind of
Yeah, I
gives
think
you
that really,
a deeper sense of culture of like bonds of like male was even genders, how they're treated, how men are treated, how women are treated, what's their history, what's so I've read this book on Iran which I feel has given me so much. It's called Under the Jacelanda Tree, I forget the name, but books from a certain place really give you a deeper insight. So I definitely read up a little bit, but I'm not someone who will travel with like a list and a sheet of like, okay, where I go, that's what. Because I like the challenge of not knowing. That's what gives me the kick
okay,
in the first place. So I don't want to read beyond the point. Yeah.
super. There's one question saying, how do you get mentally fixed to travel? Because it's not always get, set, go kind of mentality everybody has. So I think the question, maybe I would rephrase it as for people who are not very impulsive or not very like, okay, chalo dekhte hain type, how do you kind of, what's your advice saying, how do you get into traveling and how do you start getting into the habit of traveling?
I think again, even I was not someone who was immediately ready to jump into trip after trip in the beginning of my timeline as a full-time traveler. I used to start with smaller trips and I used to mix it up. If I was going solo once or twice, I would also try and go with either friends or people. Like I've traveled like the caravan trip I told you, I joined two people I knew at that point only on Instagram, but I was like, hey, they're doing something so fabulous, so amazing. They seem like people I can get along with. So I would then go with people who I know are seasoned travelers. Like, a lot of you asked me, someone just asked me, can I travel with you? I used to be that person. I find people I thought were doing great work, or were doing trips that I wanted to do, and I just write to them and join them. I've done that twice, and that's great. So I think mentally, you just need to know why you want to go on a trip. Is it to just experience the backpacker lifestyle? Like, a lot of people think solo travel is the only way. It's not. It's cool right now. A lot of people think it's cool to be a solo traveler, so a lot of people want to try it. But I have friends who've tried it and hated it, and that's okay. Go on a group trip. Like, I went to Thailand this January on a trip with this company called Kontiki. You know Kontiki, right? They're group trips. That's not a kind of trip I usually enjoy doing, but it was a work trip, and I think a lot of people would actually love that, because some stuff is sorted out for you while other stuff is fluid. So you don't have the pressure of planning and, wondering how
Figuring
to get
out.
taxi, how
Yeah.
to figure where to eat. They're sorting all of that for you, and all you're doing is going on that ride, meeting new people, and having a ride. So I think
So I
just
think,
decide what kind of travel you like to do, and you'll get
yeah,
it.
I think one thing that you said also really makes sense is that in net you have to feel happy doing what you're doing, right? So I think
Yeah,
you can't get hung up in saying what kind of traveler you are versus actually doing and enjoying the place, which is why you even set out to travel in the first place,
yeah,
right? I mean,
yeah.
and
Establish your purpose. Yeah,
correct. And you could start off, doing this, but as things go on and life happens, I mean, you might start getting used to different ways of travel, and then you just can't be fixated to saying this is the only way, right? So I think, super.
yeah,
One more
yeah.
question coming in is, I mean, this obviously one question which is basically post-COVID, safety is going to become key, right? So what is your sense in terms of how will budget hotels fare
How to?
post-COVID? How will budget hotels do post-COVID? Will they be able to continue to get customers because people are going to start valuing safety, right? And in hostels, like you said, I mean, like once when I went on a hostel in Eurotrip, I was literally with friends, and we didn't realize. I mean, 2000, I think 2008 or nine, the concept of shared restrooms, right? I mean, it was very alien
Right.
for us, right? So and we didn't realize we booked a shared restroom, and there was like that's something I'll never forget. That's something that
Yeah.
scarred my memory for a really long time. So, what is your take on that? Like, how do you think hostels will combat safety, cleanliness, hygiene? Do you see dorm
Yeah.
rules changing? Do
Yeah.
you see private cabins
Yeah.
coming up a lot more?
Yeah, I think like we've already been listening to what the new normal on flights may be. We've been hearing things like they're going to make sure social distancing is still a reality for the next few months at least. I've been hearing that, the middle seat is going to be left empty. You're going to get the window. You're going to get the aisle. That way you ensure that there's a certain distance between people. I think personally, the future of travel, at least for this year, for me, is domestic. And I see road trips being a big deal now, as opposed to flying somewhere, because flights might be expensive. And also, you don't know the trauma of just being in such a big crowd. First the airport, and then the flight itself, and then you're getting off and you're at the airport again. I feel like there's going to be a lot of hesitation on that front. And I see road trips being a big deal. I see camping or even Airbnbs and places where your interaction with staff is limited, or with fellow guests is limited. I see that being, I personally choose that more over the next few months. And for someone like me, I would love to be camping more. I would love to be like as away from people as possible. I don't think travel is dying, but certainly I feel like there's going to be some changes in the way we travel. And I would plan only domestic for the next few months. And even when I start very carefully, because again, I'm not just someone who wants to travel. I am someone who, fortunately and unfortunately, has certain interests. I have to be very responsible with what I do, because what I do is telling people to do the same thing sometimes. So I have to be very aware of that.
That's true. I think so. Given that I travel with family, I think one thing I really will see is that like a lot of these branded hotel chains will do a lot. I already see. Thank you, Sidhu. That's a very interesting compliment. Thank you for that. But coming back,
Huh.
so I think that's going to be interesting because our travel big hotel chains are going to start doing a lot more safety, and they're going to try and see how they get a lot more families on board. Is my sense.
Yeah.
Super. Coming back, we were talking about how you were a ocean person,
Yes.
right? So we'll pick it up from there. Yeah.
Yeah. Um.
So what really drives you, like what really excites you about oceans, and Where have you been? I'm sure then Bali must have been amazing. Where else have the ocean really hit you
So
hard?
I think my affinity for the ocean is not just beach time, but it's primarily the world underwater. I feel like in our planet,
Okay.
the only other realm that is so different from everything else you see and feel in life. It's a whole different world. It's a whole different dimension. You go underwater and it's quiet like you've never known silence before. It's just the sound of your own breath. And to me, it's like it's been such a big process of meditation. Like, I can't do the regular kind of meditation. I'm someone who has a lot of thoughts in her head all the time, and I can't, I don't know how to focus. But when I'm underwater, I've never felt that kind of peace, that kind of connection to myself. And then, of course, life underwater. But yeah, so I think I started diving 3 years ago, and it's just changed my life entirely. So definitely a water person. Every year I'm like looking where I can go that's close to the ocean where I can dive. So yeah, that's kind of how
So I'm
the
sure then Philippines must be on your bucket list.
oh
Philippines,
hell,
I've heard, is a
100.
great diving spot.
I want
Yeah.
to dive with whale sharks there, and the water looks unreal. And not just diving, it's such a big adventure destination. I'm someone who loves to jump, like cliff jumping is something I love doing. And the Philippines has some of the most gorgeous waterfalls, and you're like jumping off cliffs and you're snorkeling, you're doing all kinds of things. So the Philippines is a huge, huge bucket list destination. I don't know where I can go, but yeah.
And how about Maldives? Because I've kind of dived in the Maldives. So I'm
Oh,
super scared of water. And
right.
I did my first ever scuba dive in Andaman, and it was crazy. So it's a separate condition. But coming back, Maldives I enjoyed a lot more than Andaman. Like, have you been to Maldives? What's your
I
take?
have been to Canada. I have been to the Maldives last year. That's where I got my advanced certification done. And oh my God, the visibility. See, for any diver, some of your best dives are when the water is clear. And visibility, when we say it's how far can you see underwater without a disturbance, right? When the water is not murky, when it's not. Wait, I'm going to read that question after I'm done.
No, no.
Ha.
Yeah, we'll do this after that. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, so the Maldives, I think, spoilt me for life because now I compare everywhere I go to with the visibility and the clarity I got there. So I saw wild dolphins. That is, I mean, I even have it on a tattoo now. I have a dive tattoo that I got done. I don't know how I can show it, but yeah, I got it done in Thailand in Jan. And yeah, the Maldives, a lot of people think it's a honeymoon destination, fancy resorts and like 1 lakh per night and stuff like that. But what a lot of people don't know is that the Maldivian government a few years ago opened up local islands. These are islands where locals actually live. So you're not getting that fancy accommodation. You're not getting the alcohol because it's an Islamic country, but you're getting the same water. You're getting access to the same waters. You're staying in guest houses. There are like
Homestays.
there's one restaurant on the entire island which serves tuna and God knows what. So I actually carried a lot of MTR and stuff on that trip. But yeah, like that's how I did my course. Wild experience. Nurse sharks, night dives, turtles, um, dolphins. Like just every time I think about it, I'm like goosebumps. So yeah.
Maldives, I think so. I think that maybe we could touch upon a little bit more while we after that we could pick up questions from Mithun. But so I think it's worthwhile touching upon that point where Maldives is not really a luxury destination, and maybe how do you get about the idea, and any tips around how to choose an island, and maybe we talk about a couple of minutes.
Yeah, I think so. Like I said, these local islands are Maldives is divided into atolls, ATOLL, right? Each atoll is a cluster of islands. And when you research, I think see the first step for anyone should be to Google. Google has a information, and if you know that you want a low budget trip in the Maldives, you have to kind of look at local islands in the Maldives. So that should be your keyword when you're researching. And I went to this island called Fulidu. And why I narrowed down on it is because Mafushi is this other bigger island that also shows up
Correct.
a lot in research. But then the more I read about it, the more I figured that Mafushi was very popular. And I'm the kind of person who kind of runs away from popular towns and spots because then it's more crowded. And I don't like crowds. Because I'm like, if I'm someone who can manage going to a quieter place and, find my way around there. So that's how I chanced upon food. And I knew that it had a great guide school. And I wrote to them. I kind of asked them a bunch of questions. So I'm someone, if I'm going to some place like this, I will directly email that person. Even if you find a place on booking.com, you just have to find the name of that place, put it onto your Google search, you'll get their website and you'll get their email ID. And then you can ask them a bunch of things like, oh, what is the ferry from the airport to your island? You know, things like this
What
that a lot of
time?
people
Yeah.
have asking bloggers. You can just ask that resort or that guest house directly. And that's what I do. So I think in the Maldives, the Babu Atoll, which is where Fulidu is a gorgeous place. It's very close to the airport. It's just a 2 hour fast ferry ride and gorgeous. Like that would be a recommendation from me. Yeah.
Coming back to Mithin's question, I'll pick it up.
Just to read
So
it
he's
out loud
asking about.
myself. I'm just gonna try and understand. I don't receive a correct answer. Okay. I was talking about flights, camps. What about budget hotel stay? Does it be safe? Homestay or 2020 only premium? No, how did you think that I mentioned premium people? I'm in fact talking about road trips, I'm talking about camping, I'm talking about homestays. These are all actually budget options to travel. I'm not someone who's going to know what hotels are going to do because I don't typically stay in hotels.
No,
So
no,
Hari, yeah.
I think what he's trying to understand is what is budget hotels. I think Mithun, the idea there, I think, is that almost every hotel will start. I mean, not just hotel, right? Any public gathering space is going to play a lot of focus on personal hygiene, safety, distancing, right? So, as China was saying, I think flights they've clearly announced that you've seen videos of Dubai airport. The Delhi airport also was covered recently yesterday. I think they've done a phenomenal job of social distancing. What we have not yet figured out, I think, is government rules on will alternate rooms open up in hotels, right? Will buffet breakfast be allowed in hotels, right? Because those kind of things are areas that people could be prone in terms of overall contact, right? So I think those are the things that are open, but I think every hotel, when the government gives a nod, will try and open up. It's just a function of does the hotel have the overall infrastructure and capability to kind of do such deep safety, hygiene kind of work. I think that's where the question lies. But I think every hotel, be it a hostel, budget hotel, 3 star, 4 star, 5 star, all of them will try opening up because India is a very, very vast country and the kind of customer segments are a lot, right? So I think it's just a function of how strict the rules are going to be. Will some hotels be able to afford it, for example, right? So those are the things that's going to be there. But I think obviously, like China mentioned, if you go alone, road trips, obviously comfort of your car. But then where will you go stay? Once you're there, you could camp. That's obviously very safe, right? Otherwise, would you choose a branded property? Mostly yes. Like Oyo could play a significant role if they up their game here because then they've built somewhat of branded content. But
yeah,
the biggest, I think, in my mind, the biggest thing is the government regulation. I think only when that's clear, we'll be able to take a call on which kind of hotels will open up faster. But I can tell you for sure that all the hotels are doing everything possible to be geared up for the opening up.
Yeah, and I think questions I would ask any property that I would go to post lockdown would be, are they fumigating the room and the entire place before I get there and check in and stuff like that? I think that's going to be part of protocol anyway, because it's already part of airport protocol from the government. So yeah.
Super. So there is a question here at 18. Wow, thank you, Shreya, for joining in. This 18, how do you start?
Sorry,
how did I start? How do you start traveling? I'm just 18. Get a passport first. Sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just. I finished my course in mass media and advertising, and I jumped right into a job as a client servicing executive in advertising for 4 years. And there was no plan to like do something on my own ever. I was a very stereotypically ambitious girl back then. Like I wanted my stability, I wanted my monthly salary, I wanted to keep growing in the system, jump jobs, keep earning more. You know, I was very like sorted in that sense. I was like, I'm very ambitious. I want to do my MBA. And this is what I think I was very heavily conditioned also by, you know, when I was growing up, that this is what I should be doing. And I was happy also. It was not like I was sad. But like I said, there were 2 trips that I did in 2015 that kind of just showed me how much travel makes me a happy person. Like I was a very different person when I was traveling, and I was a very whiny person in the city in Bombay when I was working. So that was one big factor. I was like, is this how I want to live? Is this how I want to like be complaining about the rest of my life? And just like, I didn't think that I was adding much value to me as a person. and to people around me. Because I thought marketing was a very like capitalist. So I had this whole like epiphany, and I was just like, I don't want to be this capitalist for the rest of my life. I want to give back more. I want to inspire. I want to do stuff like that. So that was one thing. And I think I went on this solo trek in Uttarakhand in 2016, no, in 2017, which was the year I quit my job. And again, it was a very like late. The realization came in much later. We didn't complete the trek. We couldn't summit on the final day because it started. There was a snowstorm, and it was just impossible to go beyond a point. And again, I was with a group of strangers, and we came back and we had a blast with a snow fight and stuff like that. We had a great day, and that was the first time I had detoxed from work. I used to be this workaholic, like get done with this email, get done with this brief, respond to this, do that. But that was the first time, and just for 4 days, I had allowed myself a detox. Why? Because I couldn't connect. I was too high up for there to be network. And I think all of that just gave me this whole thing that I'm constantly chasing a summit in life. And the journey was just as beautiful. That was the first time I just realized how this whole cliched statement that the journey is better than the destination, la la la. I actually felt it on that trip. And it gave me the power to drop out of that system, that rat race, and try this. If nothing else, I gave myself a year. I was like, chalo, let me try doing this. And if I fail, it's okay. I'll go back to corporate life. It's not the end of the world. So yeah, I think that's how it started. It started as a very small step.
Shreya, my opinion there would be, I think travel is everything you do, I think for me personally. So even if it means, even like, I think a very interesting point Sharanya made was start local, start somewhere where you can go and come back and feel comfortable. I think very interesting thing. I really like the fact that you responsibly said it's also our duty to keep our parents informed, ensure that somebody knows, right? So do that, start small, even just a normal trip to, let's say, Pondicherry or somewhere where you can just take off with your friends. Maybe start doing that. And I think it's important you realize that I think other point you made very important, Shreya, resonated a lot, is that it's not necessary that everybody will enjoy one kind of travel. So I think you will discover what kind of travel you enjoy. For example, I really like stays. When I travel, I really enjoy being in a good place, and that is a part of travel for me, right? So I think it's important to kind of get that. For the first time, I think Instagram is telling me time is limited in the life.
Yeah,
I've never experienced this. So we're gonna kind of quickly run through in countries like Portugal, Greece, Costa. I heard that locals don't speak English. How do you manage?
You use Google Translate. You definitely learn a few words before you go, especially the important ones like taxi, bus stand, food, milk, no milk, whatever your food restrictions are, and generally thank you and I'm lost. How do I get? You have your address written down. These things I think you
Yeah,
definitely learn before you go, and the rest of it there is Google Translate, and there is also very exaggerated sign language. Yeah.
sign language. Super. So 1 minute, I'll quickly do some couple of questions from my end, which is very similar here. So where do you see this going? I mean, you did today nomadly, it's here, and exactly 20 seconds for you to answer. So where do you see yourself 5 years from now? Clock starts
This is
now.
the one answer I will not answer. I don't have a 5-year plan. I hate having 5-year plans. You don't know what's happening
You are
tomorrow.
forced to answer. You are forced to answer. Somewhere where you close your eyes, meditate, you are
5 years
underwater.
from
Now,
now, I see myself having a bigger platform to show. I've not done too many videos. I see myself doing more videos and really getting people into sharing a place with you, not just at surface level, but much, much deeper. And I see myself leading more group trips. I see myself taking my travelers, my followers on trips with me. Yeah.
super. Great. 20 seconds left. Thanks a lot. It was super fun. I enjoyed. Really, time flew. Thanks a lot again for coming in. And
Thanks, Sunny.
stay
Thank
safe
you for
and look for your next trip.
Yes. Good luck. See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.